Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever in the world you are, welcome to the Frontier Energy Network. It's great to have you with us. For those of you who are new to Frontier, we welcome you. And to those who are coming back for more, welcome back. It's great to see you. I can see loads of you out there, and it's wonderful to have you all with us. At Frontier, very quickly, the Frontier Energy Network is the leading network for those changing the face of global energy. If you're interested in finding out more, there's a teaser button. You can download our little teaser, which is underneath the video feed here. This is the first episode of the Changing Face of Energy series. And today, we're shining a light on two members of the Frontier Energy Network. Anyone who follows world events can't help but be well aware of the impact that energy has on all of our lives. So now more than ever, it's important for us to take stock and get the thoughts and insights from those who live and breathe the energy industry. Over the next 4 episodes, we'll explore different angles and talk with leaders who are making decisions that impact us all, whether that's in the short term as they grapple with highly volatile energy markets, or as they plot the course for their companies in a world increasingly focused on the energy transition and where capital for hydrocarbons is becoming harder to secure. In short, energy is a complex game, and right now it's playing a central part in world events. So it's important that we hear a different perspective. Today's discussion is interactive. You, the audience, can join in by putting your questions in the live discussion. You'll see that bottom right-hand corner of the screen you're looking at. And you can put your thoughts and responses to our speakers in the chat function there. If the questions are good and the chat's interesting, I'll start relaying that to our speakers today. I've also added a couple of polls in there today about future oil price. Interested to get your view on where you think that's going. So please get involved. The more involved you get, the more interesting this becomes. So without further ado, I'm pleased to welcome 2 of our members to join us here today. Benoît de la Fouchardiere, the Group General Manager of Perenco, Europe's first independent oil and gas company with a worldwide portfolio of assets, and Paul McDade, Chief Executive Officer of his new venture, Afentra PLC, well known as the former CEO of Tullow Oil. Gentlemen, welcome to the Changing Face of Energy. How are you both?
Thanks, Daniel. Glad to be here.
Good. Glad that you could both make it. We're just going to kick this off. We've got about 45 minutes. We're going to try and keep this reasonably high tempo, lots of questions to get through. As I said earlier on, audience, you can put your questions down there for the panelists. So let's start at the widest possible level. We're here to talk about the changing face of energy. In your view, what is changing? Should we start? Paul, do you want to kick that one off?
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. It's an interesting question, and I suppose you need to think about, what time scale you're thinking about in terms of the changing face. So if we go quite far back and think of the last 5, 6, 7 years, I think clearly climate change, energy transition has dominated our world and our conversation. And also, I think some of the amazing stuff that's going on in renewables and the progress that's been made. So I think that's really at the center of our changing face of energy. I think also coal's now been put in that bucket, I think, along with tobacco and arms and a few other things that are completely undesirable. People will have their view on that, but that's kind of where it is. And I worried that oil and gas was kind of heading to the same dark place. I think that's been modified in the kind of more recent past. I think, this view is not just climate campaigners. I mean, I think the climate lobby have done a phenomenal job, better than I think our own industry's done. And in terms of they have basically made this a very mainstream conversation that's been accelerating. And in the finance side, there's been a rush to, green investment funds. If you talk to anyone who's raising funds in the capital markets for portfolios, they'll talk about the need to be green and raise funds in that direction. And obviously what that's had is a knock-on effect in our world of a kind of lack of finance available for oil and gas. So I think that's my kind of synopsis of the broader scope. I think if we get into the shorter term, then we'll maybe talk about that. Things have progressed a bit, and I think of a slightly more pragmatic approach, but maybe I'll pause there.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks very much. And Benoît, what do you think? What is the changing face of energy? What's changing?
What does not change is the need for energy. This is not something. This will never change. The mix will change. The mix is changing, but we are still consuming a lot of coal. 20% of the global energy is made from coal, and this is the one that will disappear first. But this is years and years. We are talking about having coal, less coal, and more other type of energy. So certainly we'll see more and more renewable popping in, less coal, but oil and gas will remain for a while. I mean, even the increase is reducing in Europe and developed country. The demand is increasing a lot in developing country, and because they need to develop their country, and it is their priority. And whatever the energy is coming from, they will use it, and it's normal, and they have to.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So interesting. I mean, we obviously there's world events right now. There's a great question that's just come in on the chat here. And I don't know who this is from. If you do put a question in the chat, please put your name down there. But it reads as follows. Both of you have got an interest in Africa. It seems Europe is looking to Africa to fill the natural gas gap. This must be good news for many African countries who have felt threatened by the energy transition. How can the NOCs make the most of these opportunities? I mean, I've been looking and working around the African energy scene for decades, and never has there been more of a focus on Africa. So what do you think? Can Africa step up to the plate? Will Africa be able to deliver, what Europe is looking for? Benoît?
I don't know what you mean by Africa, because Africa is a continent. It's a lot of countries. But what is sure is we have started to develop gas in Africa from more than 15 years. Typically in Gabon, we have developed the gas network there in 2006 to feed, to use gas for gas to power and gas to industry, and gas will be a priority for local needs before it is used for export.
Yeah.
Then the demand the demand for gas from the world, we certainly support the development of gas in Africa, not only for the major gas field, but also from more marginal fields. Yeah, at Perenco, we started this some years ago, 10 years ago in Cameroon, when we have contracted a Golar FLNG vessel to be able to export from marginal field, 500 BCF field, some gas out of Cameroon. But the priority was to feed the local gas plant, the local industry, and then the surplus, you can export it, and it has to remain like that. If we start to develop gas field just for export, we make it wrong.
Yeah, fundamental point, isn't it? I mean, 60% of Africans don't have access to energy, or to the sort of energy that we in the West expect. So why would they export it before they can help improve their own lives? Absolutely, good point. And Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose my historical experience in sub-Saharan Africa, I mean, as Benoît says, Africa is a large continent, and there's different segments of the oil and gas industry, and clearly in Northern Africa has got a different complexity to where I'm more familiar in sub-Saharan Africa. But, I think the gas industry in sub-Saharan Africa is a lot less mature than the oil industry. And certainly that's something we come up against in terms of the commercial structure. So commercial structures that we're used to in the North Sea, where gas is just a commodity like oil, you go find it, you sell it into a marketplace. That, as far as I'm aware, really doesn't exist across sub-Saharan Africa. And it's very much country by country. I think it was always historically seen as a byproduct and a secondary item. That's changing. In my experience, that's changing because, power and the local needs. That's why it's changing, not because of export. And so I think one needs to look at gas through an African perspective, like of the local energy minister or the local populace or the local regulator. And I think they look at gas very differently to the way we in the West, I think in Europe, we just look at gas like oil. It's just a commodity, it flows, it's always available. I think there's a very different perspective in sub-Saharan Africa. And I think that's a conversation that I still think is quite immature. And I couldn't agree more with Benoît. I think this this tension, all that question that come in, all it is an increase in tension between export and domestic requirement for gas, and then the whole commercial, let's say, complexity and structure around that, because it has to work commercially.
I assume as well, though, that having extra demand for gas is generally a good thing, right? It must be, if you're trying to develop a gas industry in an African country, it must be a good thing that there's a global demand for gas. Or does that make it more complicated because the price is more of a pool to take gas away from the domestic scene? What's your experience there?
It's a bit of both. I mean, the global demand will push the technology. It's always like that. They will push the research and development for more efficient solution, for more smaller volume, for less capital required to develop a gas field. So all of this is very good. But yes, you're right. When you sign a gas to power or gas to industry contract, it can't compete in terms of price to an export, to LNG export at the price level of today. Then price level of today is the price level of tomorrow. I mean, 2 years ago, gas price was very depressed. we should remember that. It was just 2 years ago. And now gas price is super high. So what we have to do is to keep a cold head and do what is technically sound. Take opportunity to develop the technology and do the development that are viable for the countries and are viable for the industry on the longer term. You don't do gas development for 2 years. Gas development is 20 years. And you have to pay attention to the kind of development you do. Otherwise, we will see a lot of capital coming in the countries. And if the gas price fall, they will just stop. And we can't do start, stop. It's important that the investors has a long-term view. It's fundamental for the countries.
Yeah, so it's the long-term. I totally get that. Taking a long-term view, but I guess that's quite challenging when you've got investors or other participants, stakeholders, who are seeing super high prices in a global market right now. And you've got, I guess, commitments in the local communities to be able to supply and to be able to supply in a sustainable long-term fashion. Paul, what do you think?
I mean, if you sit here in the UK, as I'm doing it at the moment, and think about how challenging it's been for our government or previous governments to put together a sensible long-term energy strategy, I'm not sure I've seen one yet from within the UK, and we move for short-term. I mean, really, I think that's the difference between oil and gas. And I think it's to Benoît's point that gas is much more long-term. It is much more complex. You know, if you have an oil field, you can go along, you can take a platform, drill some wells, take an FPSO, and you can sell the oil into the commodity market, and it can be done in almost splendid isolation within the fiscal terms and the regulations of the country. Actually, a gas development in that same country is a much more complex project, both legally, commercially, and it has to try and fit into the kind of energy strategy of the country. And I think, as you'd expect, many of these countries are working hard to try and adopt and put together an energy strategy. But that has to look at the long term, as Benoît was saying. And I still, my belief is it's still quite mature. And this pull from Europe could enhance it in the terms that it will get more focused. There's more value there. So maybe countries will see a lot more value in their gas, but it will create tension between domestic requirements and export requirements.
So is what's happening right now in the high price of gas in the short term, is that making capital easier to access now? Or are the markets taking a much longer view and they're seeing this as just a short-term blip?
I mean, I'll give my opinion on, you know, the capital availability. And so Afentra, a small company, we're new. We're in the market to go buy oil and gas, producing assets, mature assets. We see the repositioning of the IOCs, and we think that there's space for more than just Perenco. There's space for other players down there as smaller independents working in that market. That's why we set the company up. In 2020, I was out talking to people about sources of capital. And because clearly to set the company up, I needed initial capital. And really those conversations at that time, and it's not long ago, this was kind of third, fourth quarter 2020, were pretty doom and gloom, in terms of availability for capital for oil and gas, certainly at the level I was talking at. And it just encouraged me even more that this was definitely the time to go set up an oil and gas company, because if you could get capital, that lack of capital was going to create a very interesting market. So I think things have improved, but I would say if we jump forward to today, the banking market that was there 5-10 years ago is not there. The number of banks that will invest in oil and gas has diminished considerably. A couple of them, I think, are starting to reconsider in the very short term, but for them to move back into this market, it won't happen overnight. But even the practicalities, I mean, the kind of committee structures are now set up, and it's all to do with climate and energy transition. It's really nothing to do with the short-term events that we see at the moment. The seeds for our current lack of capital were sown back in 2015, 16 with the downturn, and then the overlay of energy transition, and then on top of that, COVID. So I think, in 2020, we had a kind of perfect storm of super underinvestment, a big push towards green funds, lack of equity, lack of debt, capital markets, and COVID kind of somehow signaling to the world we could reduce demand. I think we're back in the real world again. Demand's increasing, and I think capital markets are starting to adjust. But my view and what I'm doing in terms of buying production assets, the main constraint in the Africa M&A market will not be the supply of assets, it will be the supply of capital.
And Benoît, you're in a very different position to Paul, obviously, operating.
I'm in a very different position, and this question was more for Paul than for me, because at Perenco, we do not ask for any capital outside of the company. We reinvest our benefit into the company to sustain the growth, and to be sure we can continue to invest whatever is the oil price or the gas price. Our edge is technical, our edge is not financial. Yeah. So it makes a big difference. It means when we think that a project is technically sound, where it is, and it also suits the needs of the government where we are, we can do it whatever is the market, I would say, as long as we believe in it.
That's really interesting. Two very different perspectives on how to work in Africa there. So I'm going to change tack a little bit now. There's some great questions coming in here. Here's one from Frank Span. It's about the energy transition. Has the war retarded or accelerated the energy transition? So let's think of that maybe on a global basis to begin with, and have a look at what that means for Africa. Do you think changes, what's going on right now, has an impact? Does it have an impact on the energy transition and the speed of change that was there, sort of perhaps towards the end of last year? And if so, what sort of change is it having? Anyone want to take that one? And why?
Yeah, I think the change was happening already. I mean, if you look at the gas price and the gas market, that change was happening. And I think all the awful events in Ukraine have accelerated that change. And I think there's a greater realization. The main change I think that's happened is there's a greater realization that oil and gas are here. They're a critical part of the energy mix, and they'll continue to be a critical part of the energy mix for the next number of decades.
Because it was being glossed over, wasn't it? I mean, you listen to the political rhetoric towards the end of last year, it was almost as if oil and gas wasn't around anymore. But of course it is, and this has put it in sharp focus. So Benoît, what about yourself? The energy transition?
I agree with Paul. I mean, when you're investing in oil and gas, it takes time, it takes people, it takes a lot of energy. You don't overinvest because there is one event somewhere in the world. You do it because it will go through the crisis, through the age, through the people, and again, the criteria, the main criteria is the project technically sound, first of all.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And another question along a similar line, but focused on Africa. Someone says here, I'm at a green hydrogen conference. How dare they be at another conference? Is there a place for meaningful renewables investment in Africa? Can this work hand in hand with the oil and gas industry?
Which Africa?
Good question. Okay, so let's assume
in North Africa.
Let's say it's West
clearly.
Africa. West Africa for the moment.
West Africa, same. I mean, then the question, there is a question of the sun, there is a question of the wind, and wherever you are, conditions are different for renewable. So this is the main question. The efficiency is the key for to produce energy. So what is the most efficient technology you can have to meet your needs? Again, in Africa, what is important is the local development of the countries, and the local development of the country require energy. So what is the cheapest? What is more independent? So when you have gas in your country, the best, of course, is to use the gas. But if you are lucky and you have plenty sun, of course, use the sun. Use whatever is available. The requirement of energy are huge.
Yeah, totally pragmatic response there. Paul?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's interesting, again, if you look at Europe, I mean, the high gas prices we're seeing at the moment, you know, it's maybe very easy for the political commentators and the politicians to stand behind and say it's these awful events that are happening in Eastern Europe. Well, actually, I don't think it is. Actually, it's basically this big push towards renewable. There is a different cost structure to renewable, back to Benoit's point of efficiency. And I think it was being glossed over. And I think there was always going to, given the direction of travel of the energy mix of Europe, there was always going to be an increase in the cost of energy. Someone had just forgotten to tell the general public that that's the direction of travel. And, you know, that's where we are. And it's been accelerated because of the events in Eastern Europe. And we're now seeing the cost. And actually, you look at the commentary with the general public and energy poverty. I mean, obviously one of the things we started Afentra on was this: you got to balance the E in ESG with the S, and our big push was in Africa. You know, there's a lot more concern on the S. There is concern on the E, but there's a bigger concern on the S because, you know, people's lives are at risk, etc. What is just amazing, I think, as I stand back, because we were kind of pushing. We had the previous conference, Daniel. We talked about just transition for Africa. You know, we're now looking at, do we need a just transition for Europe? Because there's 6.5 million households in the UK, at the latest figure, who are in energy poverty. So, you know, the message we were trying to push for Africa is actually quite relevant at the moment within the British space, but I suspect within the European space. So it's back to, previously we were driven by not philosophy, but by efficiency, as Benoît says. In Europe, we got driven by a big agenda, which isn't a very important, I don't want to diminish it, a very important agenda. But what was put to one side was efficiency and the cost of following that agenda.
It does feel that, certainly in the West here, that the political rhetoric has been, you know, a lot of, up until recent times, there's been a lot about sort of this energy transition thing, and people were reluctant to talk about the cost implications of energy. And now we're seeing that as the sort of underlying sort of oil and gas prices have gone up. You know, that impacts us all dramatically. Okay, so let's just, I know I've got some more questions coming in here. Here's a general one that we've got a very broad collection of people sort of taking part in today's event. Here's one that came in earlier on. What advice would you have for those seeking a career in the energy sector? Where are the longer term opportunities? So I guess we've got some people who are at the earlier start parts of their career here. Where, if you were guiding them, where would you send them? Where would you suggest that they head? Benoît, any thoughts of that? If you were helping people out?
Working in the oil and gas is a fantastic journey. I mean, if you want to travel across the world, if you want to meet people from different countries, different culture, every day is a challenge, every day is exciting. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's very difficult, sometimes it's super enjoyable. I mean, it's a fantastic job. It's a job you do by passion. It's a job, it's not just a job. It's much more than that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I had in my former career, I worked for an energy company. I spent 2 years in India, and I remember being dropped into India as a sort of young Scottish chap, not really knowing much about the world. And my first 6 months, my eyes never shut. They were wide open every day. But I look back on those 2 years, and it's amazing how it changes you and just gives you a much better view of the world, having that sort of that global view. Paul, what about you? What advice would you give someone?
I mean, I think like Benoît, I mean, the industry, when I look back in 35 years, it's remarkable what it's delivered to me personally in terms of the same words, enjoyment, frustration, seeing amazing parts of the world and cultures and being involved in the culture, not just passing through it and looking at it from afar, actually being involved and being able to have an impact. I mean, our industry has an impact on countries, and there's been, I still recall the first oil moment in Ghana, and it makes you proud, right? Because you were a part of a history of the country where I'm sure Benoît's got moments like that as well, but it was really impactful for that nation. So it's a phenomenal industry, and I struggle, maybe I'm just slightly biased, but I struggle to look back and think of what other industry would have given me such a wonderful experience for so long. If I was sitting as 20, I think one has to take into account there is an energy transition, and there's decades more. But one of the things that I was very conscious of the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years is that I think the oil industry, the center of the oil industry, is going to be much more in the developing economies. And as you would expect, the kind of human resource, certainly, I know Perenco is very much there, and in my previous lives in Afentra will be the same. The resources, the human resource, the priority has to be the nationals of the country in which you're actually working. That's where the priority should be given in terms of the human resource that gets the experience and benefits from the. And I do think going forward. So I think if you're sitting here talking to a Gabonese or a Ghanaian or an Angolan, I would say this industry is phenomenal, and it's got phenomenal opportunities both locally and if you develop internationally for you. I think if it was someone in London sitting talking to me as a UK national, I'd maybe have a slightly different view, because I think our industry in the North Sea is very much at the tail end of its life.
That's interesting. We've at Frontier, we've been quite involved with some of the latest licensing round discussions around Mozambique. And it's been really interesting meeting young Mozambicans really excited about the opportunities that what's happening there is coming their way. And they are champing at the bit. Skilled people, smart, bright people, really keen to do something that will, a lot of it is about impacting their environment, being involved in the big thing that's coming over the horizons. That's really interesting. Another question come in here from, again, this is Frank Spann. Paul, this is referring to something earlier on. You make an interesting point. Someone forgot to tell the general public. Should the energy industry be standing up and explaining to the general public some of these challenges? And, are we too reliant on allowing others to drive the rhetoric, I guess? What do you think? Is it something that we can do as an industry, or is that asking for trouble? What do you think?
No, we are not politicians. We are investor. We are technician. We do the job we have to do. We have contract with host countries. We have obligation. We have also some rights. And what is important is to do our job. Our job is to deliver oil and gas, to support the development of the countries, to support the people, and to do it as the best as we can, and improve every day a bit more. It's not to convince general people that what we do is right, and what we do and trying to work into the energy mix to push one side or the other side. The energy mix is the energy mix. Again, there is still coal in the energy mix. And there will be oil and gas in the energy mix for a while, especially in country in development. And this has to be done. Access to energy is a priority, whatever is the energy.
Yeah, very good. Paul, your view?
Yeah, similar view in terms of our key central role is to deliver energy, and we happen to deliver it via hydrocarbons. However, the one thing I think we've done a particularly bad job at as an industry is kind of explaining to the general population, the importance of that source of energy and what it's done. Because right now, I mean, if I sit with my children's friends and we have a beer and we talk about the energy mix, and And their only focus on oil and gas is the only thing that oil and gas has delivered over the last 50, 60, 70 years is the climate emergency. Well, actually, I have to sit and explain to them that actually oil and gas has taken, hundreds of millions of people out of poverty all around the world, whether it was coal or oil or gas. So I think there's something, it's more educational. I agree with Benoît, we're not politicians. We're not there. We're there to do a job and to deliver. But I think we could have done a better job of educating people about the very positive impact that the hydrocarbon industry has delivered to the planet. And I think it's been quite fundamental, in terms of a lot of things we take for granted would not be there today if it hadn't been for the initial explorers in oil and gas.
But it's the same for nuclear, for the nuclear industry. It's the same for almost all the industry, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, yeah. And it's quite easy, I suppose, for the general public almost not to think about when they walk into a room and they flip the light switch on, what happens to make that all happen. It's just there until one day it's not there. Then they start focusing on it. And of course, there are those people in the world who've never been able to walk into a room and flick on a light switch. And that's exactly what we're addressing and talking about today. It's helping more people get that ready access to affordable energy. Okay, very good. So another question here, Paul, this is coming for you, I'm afraid. And it's a specific one about Afentra. Afentra has applied for deep water acreage in Kwanzaa. Is this a strategy to commercialize gas?
No, actually, without getting into too much detail about Afentra, because we're probably not here to talk specifically about Afentra, we applied. As I say, our focus is on pursuing mature oil and gas, mainly in West Africa, that is disposed of by the NOCs or the IOCs or other parties that find it less material. In the process that the Angolan Sonangol ran, they clearly had a mixture of exploration and production licenses. And what we saw was things, my experience in Africa is things are built on relationship. And we went in and we looked at the assets we wanted, which was Block 305 of producing assets, which we thankfully secured. But we also saw that we could assist Sonangol and assist Angola by putting some of our intellectual capital into Block 23, which is the block you refer to. So it's not a big strategy towards exploration. It's more a strategy towards Angola to support Angola and what their priorities are and try and see if there is potential there, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Thanks for that. So here's one coming from Amalia Riley, stalwart of the industry. Who is best positioned to take the message to the public that the need for oil and gas will continue for a long time? So if it's not the industry, who is it? Who is it that conveys it?
The same. The question is completely different when you're in Europe or when you're in Africa. I mean, typically, if I take Tunisia, in Tunisia, the people, they know perfectly the oil and gas business. They have no problem with that. They want to develop their energy mix with solar. And we have developed a 1 megawatt solar farm to support this push in Tunisia. But it's not one against the other. It's all together. And they have no problem with that. And Tunisian people, they want to work in the oil and gas industry. And they are very welcome in Tunisia and in other countries as well. In Africa, I think oil and gas is still seen as a good career and an opportunity. So the perspective is completely different from which country you are looking at it. It's clearly in Europe, oil and gas looks not attractive unless you're in it and you realize that you're an actor and it is a super job. But yeah, the perspective is different.
Okay, that's interesting. And Paul, what do you think? I mean, who should?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's a very balanced view in Africa about the importance of various sources of energy, and maybe it's that lack of energy and lack of access to energy that people are not particularly, what they want is access to energy. And in fact, I think Benoît's earlier point about they want efficient energy, any energy, first of all, and then when they have energy, efficient energy at the lowest possible cost. I think that's where Africa remains. I think, unfortunately, in Europe, we've kind of gone beyond that, where we take energy for granted. And we've taken the cost of energy for granted, that it's always there and it's always, on a relative basis, low cost. And I think we took ourselves into this crisis by really not appreciating kind of the importance of the balance of various sources. I think in terms of, going on the front foot of oil and gas in Europe, the days to do that are past. I think in Europe, we need to just keep our head down and do our job.
Yeah, okay, it's a good point. I suppose here's a question that comes out of that. So we're talking about in different geographies, different countries, the perspective is very different. In the West, we've been talking about the energy transition a lot more in the West and what that means to us. Has it become harder to find talent, the right sort of young engineers in some of these countries where perhaps their minds are being led in different directions by different perceived priorities? Has Perenco found that harder to hire people, or is the talent still there?
In Europe, clearly, there is a different move, but young people that are coming to the company today, they are even more motivated than the previous one. So because they know and they have a good reason to join the company. But yes, the panel is a bit more restricted than it was. But again, in producing country, no, it is attractive, and people want to work in the oil and gas industry. So you can have access to the most talented people. Then the academic level sometimes is a bit different. So you need to readjust, you need to train, you need to have a specific career plan for them, which will be different from a European, but it's perfectly workable. And we have so many jobs to feed. There is so many opportunity wherever the country is that there is a good career for everyone who is motivated and talented. We have the potential to be developed.
Excellent. Paul, are you experiencing anything out there?
Yeah, well,
no.
I wouldn't talk about my current company, given we're 10 people, so we're
well, 10 people, we're growing.
We're quite small at the moment. But
just
if I look back,
6,500.
If I look back and I think about kind of my previous roles, but one question I used to ask people when we were recruiting was, in the African countries we were working, we could attract the top talent, right? And as Benoît says, okay, maybe the institutions they went to were a little bit different to the institutions in Europe, but that doesn't mean the potential, the academic and intellectual potential is not there. It is there. It might just need further support to develop it fully. But of the pyramid of talent, we in those countries, we could take the top talent. I think where we got to in Europe, and well, my experience was the UK, not the whole of Europe, was that we couldn't access that top talent. It gone off to technology or other places, right? So if we're going to recruit in the UK, we had to accept that we were maybe not going to attract the top of the pyramid. And I kind of generalize, of course. So my view was, well, why would I go further down the pyramid when I can actually go to Africa and pick up the top of the pyramid and recruit there and then move those people around my organization because they have maybe more potential. So I don't think there's a shortage of talent at all for the industry. I think it's just one has to look where the talent is and what talent is attracted to our industry and go after that. There's not a shortage.
That's really interesting insight. Benoît, here's a question for you. Innovation is important to Perenco. You mentioned this earlier on. Can you talk to us about the innovations you're deploying?
Plenty. Innovation is key for us because we are working at a kind of frontier. We are specialists in mature and marginal fields, and if you want to make this field economic at $40 barrel, you have to do things differently. So you need to have the proper people, the proper organization, but you also need to have the proper techniques. And we realized in 2016 that if you continue to apply technologies that is on the market, the system won't be sustainable. So we had to develop our own set of company in parallel of Perenco to be sure we have access to the proper tool at the proper time, at the proper cost. I mean, working through the crisis in 2016 has been a kind of rejuvenation of the company. We have to rethink about everything. We have to put clearly on the table what are the technical problems, how can we produce this field, how can we develop this one. and which kind of how we will tackle the decommissioning. Decommissioning, when you're a mature field specialist, you have to take care of the decommissioning. We set up a company in the North Sea for that, called Petrodec, and this company started to work in Congo as well, because we understand that it's part of the job also to clean up everything at the end of the exploitation. Even if our core business is to continue to produce forever, there is a moment where it does not work anymore, and it's part of the normal life. So yeah, innovation is everywhere, from exploration to decommissioning, and it's part of our specialty, is part of what we like at Perenco, of course, is to do things a bit differently. Same rules, but the approach is different.
Very good. That's really interesting. And do you feel it gives you an edge in the market?
Sorry?
Does it give you an edge? Does it give you the ability to access resources you wouldn't otherwise get, for example?
We see opportunity where others won't see it. I mean, we are a recognized operator, well known for that. We like to do things that the others don't. So typically, we have put into production with Tullow in Gabon, a field who was laying in 120 meters water depth, discovered by another operator. It was super challenging, but we completely changed the way we lay pipeline. We changed the way we put a platform. We changed a lot of things to be able to put that into production, make it economic at $40. And we had a super field with phase 2, phase 3 development coming in. But if you don't tackle the problem from the beginning with the proper innovation, so one problem, multiple solution, one choice. Yeah, okay. And then you assume. You assume, you do it, you take the lesson learned for the next one when it fails, but you deliver. There is a moment where, again, our edge is technical. This is what makes the difference at Perenco.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That's really interesting insight. So we're coming towards the end here. Here's an interesting question coming from a totally different aspect here. You're both at the top of your respective organizations and have been there for some time. People are always curious. Can you talk us through your average day, please? What does the average day of the boss of Perenco look like, for example?
It's busy day. It's about management. What is sure is my job is a bit different to my peers because we do not request access to capital. We self-finance everything we do. So it's very, very technical. It's technical and human. I would say 50% technical, 50% human. And then, of course, all the stakeholders, management of stakeholders, management of shareholders. But private company management of shareholders is something serious, but it's straightforward. It's end-to-end, and we take decision all together, always. And again, it's allows us to have this long-term view, which is fundamental in this business. So yeah, then again, as I say, we try to have a different technical approach to any problem we face. So it means a lot of discussion, a lot of ideas, a lot of debates. And then at one moment you have to decide, and at one moment it will come to me to take a decision, and then you follow the project. You see how the people will execute it, and you do the lesson learned, and you go on the next one. I mean, it's fantastic. It's amazing what people can do.
Here's a personal thing. What time do you get up in the morning?
Oh, far too early.
Early.
I have short nights, unfortunately. I'm dreaming sometimes about having longer nights.
Paul, what about you? What does your average day look like at the moment? Different to Benoît, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure it's very different. And of course, we're back in startup territory. You know, so I've been here before. My days today look very much like they were about 20 years ago, except for I look a bit different than I did 20 years ago. But you know, it's very much business development. You know, it's about relationships and going out into those networks and seeing where the opportunities are. And like Benoît, the capital markets are very important to us at the moment in terms as we try and get the company moving forward, both the debt side and the equity side, and kind of maintaining in those networks within country. So and then I've got a small team, so it's very nice. We're a small collegiate team who we all known each other for quite some time. And there's no complexities. I mean, I think as companies grow and they get much bigger, there's certain necessary complexities that come with large organizations. So I suppose I benefit from not having any of that at the moment. I'm hopefully, and I'm sure it will come, but so it's a kind of fun time at the moment in terms of that. I mean, one comment I wanted to kind of add to what Benoît was saying before about the importance of technology. So I support him there, but I think the other thing, and I'd applaud Perenco on this, and I'd like to think we can do the same, is, success comes from what Benoît was saying about technology, but I think also my view would be the relationship management and the understanding of how to work in some of the countries that we were working in. I wouldn't want to have people out there think that it's just technology, because it's not. And I think, Perenco are right at the forefront of that relationship management, trying to think through the eyes of the countries in which you're dealing with and think about how they feel about things, back to the kind of gas conversation at the beginning, and what's important to them, I think is really fundamental. And, we announced the first deal last week in Angola, and I think what got us to the end result of that was, okay, what we could bring from a technology and the development of that field, but I think very much of understanding that relationship management and understanding what it was that Sonangol was looking from that overall process that helped us get there as well.
So a cultural understanding as well, I guess, just understanding what works in different parts of the world.
Well, I don't think it's that difficult, Daniel. I mean, I think it kind of can come very naturally if you just listen. If you're just aware and you listen and you do the right thing for the people in front of you, or the organization in front of you, or the country that's in front of you. I think it's that simple. But it's quite surprising how many people don't quite latch onto it and get it right.
Yeah, I've seen that in the past.
It's a good point. Just to add something. It's a good point what you say, Paul. Of course, it's fundamental. Everything we do is with the country. We partner the national company everywhere, and it supports a lot any development. When you try to tackle a difficult project, you need the national company with you.
Yeah, it's quite right. So characters and individuals, the people you hire, I guess, as well as yourselves, are really important. Just linking to that, there's a question that's come in that just before we finish, I wanted to put to you. Leadership. What have you learned about being an effective leader? And the second part of this, how do you manage with the stress? Because you're both, I know, in very different positions right now, but you're both busy people, lots going on. How do you become an effective leader? And on a personal level, how do you manage your stress? Benoît, how do you do that? When it comes to leading your company,
what is important is a balance between your personal, your family, and your job. And I work a lot on that to be sure it is not disbalanced too much between those three, which is, of course, it's impossible to get the right balance, but it just to pay attention to the excess. If you don't pay attention to yourself enough, if you don't pay attention to your family, or you don't pay attention to your job, you will be wrong at one moment or another. You will be exhausted. You will lose your clean mind. I really try to have the feet on the ground and the cool head every day, every night, every time. And for that, I need to exercise myself. I need to read. And I need to work.
That's really interesting. And what about you, Paul? How does it work for you?
I mean, I think in terms of leadership, what I've probably learned over the years is that, a leader is really about gathering together a great group of people, people and then listening to them, providing direction, but really, delegating and listening and working as a team. And then what I also found was that if you respect people, you know, what I found in this industry is amazing is that, you know, people, of course, they're there because they want to work hard and earn a living and earn a salary and whatever. But actually, really great people, what motivates them is doing an interesting job and being respected for their contribution. And I think if you don't always get that right all of the time in every organization, but I think the more you're able to get that balance of respecting everyone's kind of contribution and providing some direction from the front, but also listening, I think that leads to a kind of a very positive culture, and then that positive culture creates success. Okay.
That's brilliant insight. So to both of you, I'm very conscious of time. To both of you, thank you very much for your time today. That's been a fascinating discussion. In 50 minutes, I think we've covered a huge breadth of topics. I think, Benoît, you're going to be joining us at the Africa Energy Summit, 17th, 18th, 19th of May. Paul, your colleagues are going to be there because I think you're heading south again during that time. But thank you to both of you. That's been excellent. Really appreciate your time. Just for the audience out there, I've mentioned the Africa Energy Summit, 17th, 18th, 19th of May. You can find out about that on our website if you're interested in coming. We have about 4 tickets left. It's proved very popular. And episode 2 of The Changing Face of Energy will be happening on the 16th of June. The focus will be innovation and the role it's playing in the energy transition. So, and we've got some great people lined up to speak there too. So from us at Frontier, thank you very much. Benoît and Paul, thank you very much. Really enjoyed having you here. And we'll look forward to speaking to you again.